We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara in Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 88b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was discussing the opinion of Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah, and the Gemara says that Rabbi Shimon was going on the line where it says that when a woman collects her ksuba and the husband is not present, so she has to collect, she has to take a shvua. But that doesn't only apply to collecting the ksuba, it applies as well to collecting mezonos. And Rabbi Shimon responds, Eina tovas ksuba, so that's not the case. If she's not claiming her ksuba, if she's asking for mezonos, ein yarshin mashbianosa. So in that case, the Yarshim, they're not able to make her take a shvua. And the Gemara says, V'kamiflagi beplugsa dechanan uvnei kohanim gedolim. This machlokus between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah is the same machlokus that we find between Hanan and the children of the kohanim gedolim. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah. Mishaholach lemedinas hayom. Let's say somebody travels far away. Ve'ishto tovas mezonos, and his wife is trying to get mezonos. So again, this is a situation. She's not trying to get the ksuba. She's trying to get the mezonos while he is not present. Hanan omer tishava besov. So Hanan says, no, at the end, when she's trying to collect her ksuba, so that's when she takes a shvua, but she doesn't take a shvua at the beginning just to get the mezonos. Nechliku olav b'nei kohanim gedolim. And the b'nei kohanim gedolim, they argued in Hanan, v'yamru, and they said, no, tishava betchila uvasov. She takes a shvua both at the beginning, meaning both by the mezonos and by the ksuba. And the Gemara explains, Rabbi Shimon kechanan, Rabbi Shimon follows the opinion of Hanan. He says again, the shvua is only basof. The shvua is only for the collection of the ksuba. Rabbanon kivnei kohanim gedolim, and the Rabbanon, they follow the bnei kohanim gedolim, and they say the shvua is taken in both situations, both by the mezonos and by the ksuba. But the Gemara continues, Maskefla Rav Sheshas. Rav Sheshas asks on this approach. Hi Yarshin Mashbianosa. The language of the Mishnah is that the Yarshim, they're the ones that make her take a shvua. Now, in a situation of mezonos where the husband is simply away, that's not a situation of the Yarshim making her take a shvua. Bezdin Mashbianosa miboile. It should simply say that the Bezdin makes her take the shvua. So to say that that is the machlokas between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon, that they're arguing about mezonos, it doesn't fit with the language of the Mishnah. So Elohim Rav Shesha, so the Gemara says, rather Rav Shesha says a different explanation of what Rabbi Shimon is going on, which line Rabbi Shimon is going on in the Mishnah. Aha, Rabbi Shimon is going on the following line in the Mishnah. The case over there in the Mishnah was that the husband made a stipulation, and he said that he's not going to administer any oaths to her. And so then the Mishnah says, let's say she went immediately after her husband died, from the grave of her husband, she went to her father's house, or she went back to her father-in-law's house. And the point is, she never became a stewardess over the property. She never took care of the business affairs of the property. So Ein HaYarshim Mashbianosa. So it says that the Yarshim, they're not able to give her a shvua, because there was a stipulation that the husband was not going to give her a shvua. But then it said in the Mishnah, but let's say she does start taking care of the affairs of her late husband. So then Yarshin Mashbianosa al ha'asid lavo, vein Mashbianosa al masha avar. So then it said in the Mishnah, the Yarshim are allowed to give her an oath on things that she's doing going forward, because the stipulation didn't apply to that, but things that happened in the past while the husband is alive, so that she doesn't have to take a shvua regarding those issues. And so now on that line comes Rabbi Shimon. V'yasser Rabbi Shimon l'meimar, and Rabbi Shimon comes along and he says, Kol zman shetovas ksubasa yarshin mashbianosa. As long as she's claiming her ksuba, that's when the Yarshim can administer a shvua to her. Eina tovas ksubasa, but if she's not claiming the ksuba, ein hayarshin mashbianosa. So then the Yarshim, they're not able to administer a shvua to her. And as we'll see in a moment, this is really just a general machlokus that we have when it comes to an apotropis. As Rashi over here explains, Eina tovas ksubasa ein hayarshin mashbianosa. If it's not a situation where she's trying to collect the ksuba, they're not allowed to give her a shvua in terms of how she took care of the property. Misham shvuas apotropsis. In other words, there's something called a shvuas apotropsis. That is a shvua that you give to somebody who's taking care of the property to make sure that they did not misappropriate anything. Tahavilo apotropis shemineu avi yisomim. This is just a general case, even if it wasn't a wife. This falls under the category of an apotropis that was appointed by the father of the orphans. Usvira le lo yishava, and so Rabbi Shimon holds that on that the halach is the apotropis doesn't have to take a shvua. Ka'abashal, that follows the opinion of Abashal. Diyamar chilaf hadavarim, he says you switch it around, you say the exact opposite of what the other Tana said. V'tamayu mefarish begitin meperak hanizak, in this machlokas Abashal and the Rabbanan, the reasoning behind it is all explained in Mesechet Gittin. Rabbanan savri minuhu bezdin lo yishava. The Rabbanan hold that if bezdin appoints the apotropis, then the apotropis does not have to take an oath. Because otherwise he's not going to be an apotropos. He's going to say, you suspect me. Since he's suspected, he doesn't want to do it. But when it comes to the father of the Yisomim who appoints him, there he's not going to refuse. He's willing to take the oath. Because there must have been some kind of benefit. This must be some kind of quid pro quo why he's being appointed the apotropos. Each got benefit from the other, and therefore in such a situation you can administer an oath according to the Rabbanan. That's by an apotropos, the Shavuos apotropos. Abishol says the exact opposite. The Abishol savar mineu av yisomim. When it comes to Abishol says when it comes to the father appointing, iyada de mishbaile, if he knew that he was going to have to take an oath, mimna v'lo have apotropos. There he's not going to be an apotropos. Aval minu bezin, but if the bezin is going to do it, afagav de yada de mashbinan le, even though he knows he's going to take an oath, lo mimna de chashivusa hilagabe. That's considered chashuv that the bezin appointed him to mehemen luhu lebeidina, that the bezin trusted him, and so therefore you have this general machlokus again in terms of whether the apotropos takes a shvuah or not when he's appointed by the Avi Yisomim, and that's exactly the machlokus between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah. Again, as the Gemara says, v'kamiflagi b'pluksa d'Abishol v'Rabbanan, they're arguing about the same issue that the Abishol and the Rabbanan argue about. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, apotropos sheminu Avi Yisomim yishava minu bezin lo yishava. The Rabbanan say if he's appointed by the father of the Yisomim, he takes an oath. If he's appointed by the bezin, he doesn't take an oath. Abishol omer chiluf advarim. Abishol says no, the exact opposite, like Rashi just said. Minu bezin yishava. If the bezin appoints him, then he takes a shvuah. Mineu avi yisomim lo yishava. But if the father of the yisomim appointed him, he doesn't take a shvuah. Rabbi Shimon ka Abishol. Rabbi Shimon is going to follow Abishol. That again, the apotropos, there is no shvuah's apotropos here. The Rabbanan ki Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan follow the Rabbanan that there is such a shvuah. And the Gemara continues, Maskif lo Abaya. So Abaya asks on this approach to the Mishnah, Hai kol zman shetovas ksubasa. The language of the Mishnah of Rabbi Shimon is, any time she's claiming her ksuba, that's when she takes a shvuah. But the truth of the matter is, the Gemara says, one second, Abaya says, im tovas mi boile. It shouldn't say kol zman. The language of Rabbi Shimon should be im. If she is claiming her shvuah, if she is claiming her ksuba rather, then she takes a shvuah. Rashi over here says, Rabbi Shimon ka Abishol v'Rabbanan demasnisin k'Rabbanan, hai kol zman shetovas bitmia, hoel v'Rabbi Shimon lakula. Because what's Rabbi Shimon really doing over here? He's just being lenient. He's saying there is no shvuas apotropos when the father appoints her as the apotropos. So he's lenient. So my kol zman, so what is it? Any time this happens, they have to take a shvuah. That sounds like he's being more machmir. Im tovas mi boile. It should be no, only if this is the scenario, that's the only case. Avol kolzman mashma de shamei l'tanakama de potter la mishvua. The language of kolzman sounds like the Tanakama said that she's potter from a shvua. Afilu tovas ksubasa, even if she's claiming the ksuba. V'yamar leiu kolzman, and then he's being strict and saying no, when she claims the ksuba, she has to. Kolzman shetovas ksubasa lo tifterena. That as long as she's claiming the ksuba, she is not potter from a shvua. That's what it sounds like. Kolzman. That Rabbi Shimon is being more strict. In reality, according to the approach just given, says Abaya, Rabbi Shimon is actually being lenient, and so therefore this approach does not work as well. And so the Gemara continues, Elo Amar Abaya, rather Abaya says Ahor. Rabbi Shimon is going on the following line in the Mishnah. It said in the Mishnah, Kasav la neder u'shvua ein li olayich, ein yochel ashbiya v'chulu, neder u'shvua ein li v'lo liyorshi, v'lo leboim b'reshusi olayich, v'al yorshayich, v'al aboin b'reshusech, ein yochel ashbiya, lo hu v'lo yorshav, v'lo haboin b'reshusa, lo hi v'lo yorsheha, v'lo haboin b'reshusa. So the line in the Mishnah said, again, if there's a stipulation in the marriage that he's not going to give her an oath, and his yorshim won't give her an oath, etc., etc., so we follow all of those stipulations. She doesn't have to take an oath, those who inherit her don't have to take an oath, etc. V'yazar Rabbi Shimon l'meimer, and on that Rabbi Shimon is coming and saying, Kol zman shetovas ksubasa, any time that she is claiming her ksuba, Yorshin mashbiyanosa. The Yorshim, they are able to administer a shvuah to her. V'kamiflagi bepluksa da Abishol ben Ima Miriam v'Rabbanan. And this would be the same machlokus that we found earlier between Abishol ben Ima Miriam and the Rabbanan. This is a reference to the fact that Abishol ben Ima Miriam said, even though really she should not have to take a shvuah because you have these stipulations, but what can we do when it comes to a situation of Yorshim? So if you want to collect from Yorshim, the Yorshim are able to give her a shvuah. That's what Rabbi Shimon is saying as well. Rabbi Shimon is saying the same thing. Kol zman shetovas ksubasa, Yorshim mashbiyanosa. In other words, means to say if she's trying to collect from the Yorshim, so again, even though there was this stipulation, she is going to have to take the shvuah. That's what it means. Rabbi Shimon ka Abishol. Rabbi Shimon is like Abishol. She has to take the shvuah. But Rabbanan ki Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan follow, again, the Rabbanan, that since there's a stipulation, there is no shvua that is needed. And so the Gemara continues 1 second. Rapapa asks on this. That makes sense what Rabbi Shimon is saying, as long as she's claiming the ksuba, so then the Yarshim can give her a shvua. But Eina Tovas Ksubasa Ma'ikal Amemer. But why is Rabbi Shimon saying the opposite? Why is Rabbi Shimon saying that if she doesn't claim the ksuba, then she does not take a shvua? What's the meaning of that line? And Rashi over here explains, Elo Amar Abaya, rather Abaya says, Aresha Polig, he's arguing on the Resha, the Amar Kosev lo neder u'shvua v'chulu, diptura min ha'shvua, afilu k'shenefras min ha'yisomim, because again, what did it say in the beginning of the Mishnah? It said that if there's a stipulation, she doesn't have to take the shvua. V'yasar Rabbi Shimon Lamemar calls mancha tovas ksubasa, mehen mashabiyan osaka Abashol b'ni Miriam. Rabbi Shimon says, no, we follow Abashol. What does he say? Damar le'el avol mo'esa, sharei amru haboli pora minichse yisomin, lo yipara ela b'shvua. Happens to be that Abashal ben Imam Miriam says, if you're trying to collect from Yisomim, in this case the ksuba, then you do have to take a shvua. Upligi Rabbanan led Abashal, the Rabbanan argue on Abashal, Rabbi Shimon, Kabashal, Rabbanan, the Masisim, Karabanan. And so then the question that Rapapa asked was, Hatenach calls mancha tovas, asalafukim Rabbanan. It says, if she's claiming the ksuba from the Yarshim, that's going against the Rabbanan, and Rabbi Shimon is saying, she's trying to collect from the Yarshim, she has to take a shvua. The Amri Afmi Shvuas HaYisomim Petur, because the Rabbanan said, you don't take a shvua when it comes to the Yisomim, and Rabbi Shimon is saying that she does. V'nifras below shvua. Again, the Rabbanan say she can collect without a shvua. V'yasar Rabbi Shimon l'meimar lo tifra ela b'shvua. And Rabbi Shimon is saying she can only collect with a shvua. But eina tovas ksubasa. But the other line of Rabbi Shimon, when she's not collecting her ksuba, the maskana demil say that's that last line of Rabbi Shimon. L'ma'itanya lo fuke miman. Who is he arguing with? Everybody agrees. There's a stipulation. There's no shvua that's needed. Why is he saying eina tovas ksubasa? She doesn't have to take a shvua. That's not arguing with, and nobody said otherwise, and therefore that line does not make sense. And so therefore, finally, the Gemara answers, Elo Amar Apapa, rather Apapa says, La'afuke mid Rabbi Eliezer umachlukas. Rabbi Shimon is actually arguing on Rabbi Eliezer and those who argue with him. And Rashi over here explains, Elo Amar Apapa, La'afuke mid Rabbi Eliezer umachlukas, kolomar lo tema. Rabbi Shimon akasav la'neder u'shvua l'chud polik. Rabbi Shimon is not just going on the case of the stipulation, where again, it says in the Mishnah, if there's a stipulation that she doesn't have to take an oath, then she doesn't have to take an oath. And Rabbi Shimon says if it's Yisomim, then she does. That's not what's going on. Ella kuli milsa de Rabbi Eliezer b'nei machlukaso polik. Rather, Rabbi Shimon is going on the entire Mishnah and saying he disagrees completely with all the Tanoim in the Mishnah. Areisha v'seifa, going on the beginning and the end of the Mishnah. What does he mean? He means as follows: Shaminu dekoami Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbanan mashbia calls man sheyirtze shvuas apetropia heicha de lo patrim in anedru min hashvua. Number one, all the Tanoim in the Mishnah seem to agree that if there was no stipulation, then she does take a shvua. Ve'afilu shelo b'shas tvias ksubas. Even if she's not claiming the ksuba, she has to take a shvua because there was no stipulation otherwise. V'im patrim in hashvua. And then the other side of the Mishnah is saying, let's say there was a stipulation to exempt her from a shvua. Afilu yarshin ein mashbiyan osa kishenifras. So then, if there was a stipulation, even if the yarshim are the ones, so then in such a situation, she doesn't have to take a shvua kishenifras mehem when she's taking from the yarshim. Kerektani neder shvua ein li yarshi v'chul. If there's a stipulation, she doesn't have to take a shvua from yarshim, even if it's yarshim, even if it's yisomim, she doesn't take a shvua. In other words, what the Mishnah seems to be saying is, if there's no stipulation, she always swears, and if there is a stipulation, she never swears. V'yazar Rabbi Shimon l'meimar, and Rabbi Shimon is saying that is not the way that we break down when she takes an oath and when she does not. He says as follows: If it's a situation of the ksuba, the yarshim can administer a shvua when she's trying to collect the shvua. Even if there was a condition that said she doesn't have to take an oath to yarshim, she still does, says Rabbi Shimon. Ka'abashal, that follows Abashal, that what can I do? When you're collecting from yarshim, you have to take a shvua. Eina tovas ksubasa, and the other way also. Let's say she's not claiming her ksuba. Ein hayorshin mashabiyan ala petropia shebechaye bala. So there, if it's a situation where she's not claiming her ksuba, the yarshim cannot make her take an oath on the business affairs that she was conducting while her husband was alive. V'afilu lo patrim in shvua. Even if there was no stipulation to exempt her from a shvua, she does not have to take a shvua. The less later Rabbi Elazar machlukaso de'amri mashabiya calls man sheyirtze, because Rabbi Shimon does not agree with Rabbi Eliezer and those who argue with him. He doesn't agree with that position that if there's no stipulation, then you can, anytime you want, you can make her take a shvua. That's not the case. Again, if you have the situation of eina tovas ksubasa, then you're not able to make her take a shvua, regardless of the fact that there was no stipulation. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hotzia get ve'ein imo ksuba. The Mishnah says, let's say she takes out her get, but she doesn't have the ksuba. She doesn't have with her the ksuba. Rashi over here says, Hotzia get ve'ein imo ksuba. There's no ksuba together with the get. Right now we think the Mishnah means that she's saying the shtar, the document of the ksuba, is lost. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Peites Amud Aleph.